All right, so the last couple days, I've spent some time in a tree stand. I'm not a huge hunter, but I do enjoy getting out. And so Thursday I went out on my own, but I went out yesterday and I had a hunting partner with me. I took my little girl, Kennedy, who's 9. She's had some influential teenagers who have hunted in her life, and so she wants to hunt, and so I love it. And so this week, yesterday, I took Kennedy out and we sat in a tree stand, and we got her camoed up and we made our way out to the stand, and we get out there, and about an hour and a half into it, we see this doe come out. And so Kennedy's like, all right, we're gonna shoot it. And so no, let's get ready and we'll look at it. And it was kind of far away. And so I put the scope on the deer, and then I hear this little voice that comes from my beautiful 9-year-old daughter. And she says, what if there's a buck? Right? So if you don't know much about hunting, does are okay, but bucks are great. And so I'm like, yeah, you're right. What if there is a buck? So that starts going through my mind, and I put the scope on it, and I'm thinking, I don't feel very confident in my shot. It's 150 yards away. I haven't shot a rifle in a long time. Like, what if I miss it? What if I just injure it? And so I'm thinking, should I shoot it? Should I not shoot it? And this little voice beside me talking, and I didn't shoot it. So it runs off, and in my mind, I'm thinking, there'll be more. There'll be more. 10 minutes later, this little doe runs by again, almost like taunting us. So it runs by, and we don't get a shot. And so we sit for about 8 hours in this tree stand, my 9-year-old daughter and me. As the day went on and it got darker and darker, we didn't see anything. And then this beautiful 9-year-old voice starts saying, we should have shot it. We should have shot it. I wish we would have shot it, and it gets darker and darker and darker. We should have shot it. And I'm like, you're the one who said there might be a buck. You started it in my mind not to shoot it. And I didn't say that to her. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm like, there's next time. And so we're walking through this field, and it's dark, and I'll never forget these little words. She said, I'm so disappointed. I'm so disappointed. Which is amazing. My beautiful little girl was hoping to see a deer killed. But she was so disappointed. And so I started thinking about this, and I started thinking about our lives and the way God often uses those moments to speak to me. And how for a lot of us, we're going to get to the end of our life. And for many of us, we're going to say, I wish I would have, or I should have. I sat with a family just 2 weeks ago. This was a first for me. I sat with the family as their mom, grandma, took her last breath. I sat in the room, and as she passed, and this was amazing to me. They didn't talk about what this woman had. There was no talk about money or resources or her house or anything she ever bought. There wasn't one conversation about that. The conversation was about memories, about their relationship. They sat there and talked about her faith. Then they sang to their mom. And her mom passed, and it was just in that moment, I was like, man, we don't live life like that. We don't necessarily make decisions thinking at the end of my life, am I going to get there and think, man, I wish life would have looked different for me. And so as we're going through this series, it's interesting how many conversations I have with people about their money, about resources, about what they've done in their life at the end of their life. And often is, man, I wish I would have done things differently. So part of my goal in this series is just that wouldn't happen for us. That we would learn how to be rich. I believe this series has the potential for you and I to be the most generous people we can possibly be. So as we enter this 4th week, remember, it's not how to get rich. This isn't a teaching on how to help you gain more money or more resources. And why is that? Well, a few weeks ago, I told you some good news. I said, you're rich. You're rich. I know you still are arguing in your mind, no, I'm not rich. I don't have all the resources I want, but we looked at it, and I think we've come to the realization, we probably are pretty rich if we look at the grand scheme of things. But I also gave you some bad news, and I said, well, there's bad news because you're rich too. It makes it really hard to depend on God when you feel like you have everything you need. We have these rich people problems, and so we become distracted by our resources, by our wealth, by our money. And then ultimately, the last thing we talked about is there's this huge responsibility on us because of our wealth, because we have much. And so we've gone from there, and we've looked through a couple different things that your money lies to you. Last week, we talked about how to be a rich giver, and if you've missed any of it, I really hope you'd go back and listen to our our messages in the weeks past. stltrinitychurch.net/podcasts. You can listen to those. Starting this week, hopefully we'll start having video. I talked about it. Someone graciously gifted us everything you've seen in the foyer. If you haven't been out in the front lobby, look at that. Someone gave us all that. They bought all that for our church family, the TV and all the cables and the camera, everything that we have for that. Someone was generous to us. And so because of that, we'll be able to start having our messages, the video as well. I hope you'll go back and catch up and listen to those things. Our scripture for this whole series is found in 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19. It's written by a guy named Paul, and he's writing to a boy named Timothy. I get this. As a pastor, I have people who are mentoring me, and there's oftentimes I'll call my mentors and I'll say, here's a situation that's going on. I have no idea what to do. I don't know what to do, and they'll give me ideas, and they'll give me suggestions. And so I wonder if Timothy, who's a young boy, he's contacting Paul. And maybe we wrote to Paul, and he's saying, look, you've put me as the pastor of this church in Ephesus, a community that was full of wealth, a community that was about magicians and sorcery. And in the midst of all of that, these people are beginning to follow Jesus. And so I wonder if Timothy says, look, here are the problems I'm having. I have no idea what to do. And so Paul writes back and he gives him some input. And then at the end, he's like, oh yeah, about the money thing. About those who are rich. I know it's difficult. I know it's hard to deal with those who are beginning to follow Jesus, but they have a lot of stuff. And I know you're having a difficult time how to help them. Now let me say this, wealth isn't bad. Timothy never hears from Paul to tell the people that wealth is bad. John Wesley, kind of a founder of our tradition of what we believe, he's a theologian, he says this, gain all you can, save all you can, and give all you can. But in that teaching, he also said, but don't gain all you can at the expense of your soul. Don't gain all you can at the expense of who you are or even your faith. So what Paul would tell Timothy to tell people is that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Not wealth, not money in itself, but when our heart turns to loving things and loving money, that is where all kinds of evil comes. So Timothy's going to say, look, Paul, I need some help. And Paul says, look, I know how difficult it is, so this is what I want you to tell those who are rich. 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19. If you don't have a Bible, we'd love to give you one. It should be around you. You can pull one out and look at it as well. 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19. It says this. Command those who are rich in this present world. Who would that be? Us. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, not to think too high of themselves, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. We talked about that week 2. But, to put their hope in God provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Verse 18. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Our focus today is going to be there in verse 18. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds. Command them to do things that are right. Command them to do well with their life. Command them to do good works, to do good things with their hands. Help them to be about things that bring life and goodness to everywhere they are. Command them, not suggest. Not, hey, it might be a good idea if you get them to. Command. This is a really strong word. Command them to do good and to be rich in good deeds. Now, last week we talked about being rich givers and what that looks like. I think sometimes it's easier to be rich givers than to be rich in good deeds. Sometimes it's easier just to write a check. Tell me what the problem is, I'll solve it with my money. And so we write a check. It doesn't take too much of a sacrifice. Sometimes it does, but not always. And so sometimes it's easier just to be rich givers but not to be rich in good deeds. Because when we're rich in good deeds, it takes more of our energy, it takes more of our time. Ultimately, it really just takes our life. And so Paul doesn't just say, hey, look, be really good in your money. He's going to say, yeah, do that, but also to do good things, to be rich in good deeds. Now, here's the other thing that makes it hard is it's much easier just to be self-centered. That's easy. The Christmas boxes we collected, our family have a tradition. We go to the Dollar Tree, and we tell the kids they get to pack the boxes. They pick out so many items, and they pack them. And so I had a cart with Cademan, and we had our boxes in there, and they were picking their stuff out, and they were putting it in the boxes. And there was one box that looked different than the other two that Heather had bought. And so I noticed that Cade was kind of putting certain things in that box. So as we talk about it, and he said, well, that one's my box. And I said, well, what do you mean it's your box? Like, that's your box that you're sending. He said, no, that one's mine, right? That one's the one that I get. Right, so for a little 4-year-old, even for him, it's easy to say, yeah, I'm going to help other people, but this, I get something too, right? Because it's much easier. It's much easier to only think about ourselves and not other people, but we want to be others focused. So we're learning about what it means to be rich with our money, but we also want to learn what it means to be rich in good deeds. Now, I'm going to give you a few suggestions on what that looks like, but before we can, I want to say something really, really important, and that's this, that you're not saved, we're not made right with God by your good deeds, but that you're saved for those good deeds. So listen to me. You're not saved because you do a bunch of good things. There's not a dry erase board where on one side you're going to write everything good you did and you hope that it outnumbers the bad. Because listen, that won't work. It doesn't work. And so Paul is writing to another church in Ephesus, and he's writing to this group of people. In Ephesians 2:8-10, it says this, for it is by grace you have been saved. Grace, this good news, this free gift, something you could never earn. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, because you've believed it. Because you believe that God saves you, you believe in this grace. That's how you've been made right with God. And this is not from yourselves. It is a gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. Because if it is about us, at some point we're like, look how good I am. And because look how good I am, then God loves me. And Paul's saying, no. It doesn't work that way. That you're saved simply because God's grace is enough. And so for some of us, at some point, we hopefully have believed that. That somewhere, someone said, look, you've done wrong, but look, there's good news. That God's grace can come into your life and you can be made right with God. And it moves to something you believe and not just something someone tells you. That's how we're made right with God, not our good things. But I don't think everyone believes that. I think some people really think if I just do enough good things, then obviously God's got to accept me. But Paul at one point even calls his righteousness, his good things, filthy rags compared to who God is. And so we have to understand that. And it goes on in verse 10, it says this, for we are God's workmanship. We are his masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. So those good works don't save us. It's you believing that God saves you. It's you believing in God's grace. And if you never have, maybe today would be a step in you doing that. Believing that God's grace is enough for you. But it's interesting that Paul says, look, you're made by God. You're his workmanship, his masterpiece. And what are you supposed to do? Well, you're created to do good things. So you're not saved by your good things, but you're saved for good things. And I've said this before, I truly believe that God has equipped you with everything you need to do everything you need to do. God has given you every gift and ability, everything you need to do everything you need to do. And so we have to begin to trust that God really can do that in us, that God really can help us to do good things. And many people, I believe, don't do good things because they think of it as this huge project. That they believed, well, if I'm going to do good, then I need to figure out what that's going to look like. And so we have to start something or do something big. A few weeks ago, there was this National Day of Serving. And I thought it was interesting that that was something that we had to put an emphasis on. I mean, I think it's great. I love that there's this attention to it, but if that's it, if for us our good works is that one day a year, well, everyone, we're going to do our good day of serving, then we've missed it because it's our life. Every day it's beginning to see, well, how can I do good things? So if you know how to work on cars, how do you use that to do good things? If you like to bake, if you can cook, well, what's it look like to help people who need a meal? You guys oftentimes are really good at that. I've received some of those meals. When people are sick, when someone dies, it's not this huge project, it's just something God has given you and the ability to cook, and so you do it and you do it well. So as we begin to journey through this, don't think just big things. Don't just think, man, how am I going to figure this out? I mean, sometimes that happens, but just see your life. What has God equipped you with? What has God given you? And then how can you use those to do good things, to be rich in good deeds? So 3 things being rich in good deeds means. 3 things I want to give you. If you want to write these down, if that's helpful, that'd be great. First one, your good deeds point to God, not you. Your good deeds point to God, not you. Here's the verse. This is Jesus. We're going to look at several verses today that Jesus is going to share. And so there would have been a large group of people who were listening. Matthew is a guy who would have written down, who would have heard. And so this is his account of what Jesus says. And this is known as the Sermon on the Mount. So we don't have a lot of times where Jesus just spends a long time preaching, what we would think of as preaching and teaching. But something happens where Jesus says, all right, this is a moment. There's a lot of stuff I need to teach. And so these things I find very, very important. And so we're going to pull out several of those things. And here's the first one. Jesus says this: you are the light of the world. He's talking to those who are following him, his disciples. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men that they may see your good deeds and praise you. That's not what it says, is it? No, they'll see good deeds and praise who? Your Father in heaven. Jesus says, look, you're put in a position to point to God. He's using this analogy. If the room is dark and you light a bowl, you're not going to light that bowl and then cover it up. That wouldn't even make sense. So what we want to do is we want our light to shine before men. We want to do good deeds. We want to be rich in good deeds. Why? Not to point to us. Not to point to even Trinity. But everything we do is pointing to God. There was this group when I was a pastor in California who would do good deeds. It was a large church, maybe 2,200 people, and no one knew who this group was. Everyone was always talking, oh, who do you think it is? Who do you think it is? No one knew. We had Kennedy, and we came home from the hospital, and you know those big boxes of diapers? There were several of those sitting on our porch with all kinds of other things we needed for our baby. No idea who it was. There's always a scripture, and they called themselves by a certain name, but nobody knew that the pastor of the church is the only one who knew who this group was. Because this group wasn't in it to get attention for themselves. They were doing it because they wanted to love people, to be rich in good deeds, and to point to God. You're going to be put in all kinds of positions. If you open your eyes and begin to recognize some of the things around you, you will be put in all kinds of positions to do good deeds. And there will be this temptation to want other people to know about it, to make yourself look good. But Jesus is saying, look, when you do good, it's not about you. It's about pointing to the one who has put hope in you. It's about pointing to the one who you know loves you. Jesus says this just a little while later in this teaching in Matthew 6. This is going to be about kind of a financial giving, but I think it can work for the other. Matthew 6, 1-4. It says this, "Be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before men to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by men. I tell you the truth, that they have received the reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." So those who were religious, those who were the spiritual elite during this day, wanted everyone to know what they were doing right. He often talks about prayer like this. They would like to go out to the street corner and have these loud, audacious prayers because they wanted everyone to notice how spiritual they were. When they gave, they wanted to make sure everyone knew what they were giving and exactly how much. They wanted it to be loud. They wanted the attention. Jesus says, don't do it for the attention of people. If you do, then you get your reward. Everyone claps, everyone gets the pat on the back, but when you do things, don't do it so that you'll be known. Do it so that God gets the attention. So what if we, and I know many of you do, and I'm not beating you up because I think we do a good job with this, but what if we did good deeds and didn't tell people? What if you served someone without posting it on Facebook or taking a picture and posting on Instagram? I've done that, right? I've done that. But what if we didn't? What if it wasn't about the likes that we got from our post, but it really was about drawing attention to God? Well, what if people began to thank God because of you and not just simply thanking you? We support, my family supports a little kid through Compassion International. When he writes to us, he often says this, "I thank God because of you. I thank God because of you." Man, every time it's a huge thing for me in my heart and my soul. That this little boy isn't just thanking me, he's thanking God because of me. And so when we do good deeds, when we're rich in good deeds, we want the attention to go to God. Now, the second thing is doing good deeds means being countercultural. Doing good deeds means being countercultural. Now, Jesus makes some statements in this, and he'd say, "You've heard it said, but I'm saying this. You've heard it said one way, but let me add something a little different to it." And things that don't necessarily make sense. And this is kind of one of them if you don't really understand it. Matthew 5:41 says this, "If someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Before that, he says, if someone sues you, just give them everything, basically. You've heard it said an eye for an eye, but basically says, let's love our enemies. Well, what is Jesus saying? Well, what is he saying if someone forces you to go to 1 mile to go 2? Well, during this day and age, the Roman Empire, the Roman soldiers, could come to you just because and say, "Look, you need to carry my pack 1 mile. And we make you do that. Carry my pack for 1 mile. And so they would have to go and they would carry it 1 mile. And at the end of 1 mile, which was 1,000 steps, they could drop the pack and be done. And Jesus comes and says, look, when someone forces you to go 1,000 mile or a mile, 1,000 steps, look at them and say, I'm going to go another mile. This was so countercultural. Because what would have been happening is in the hearts of people, they'd be like, why got to carry this guy's pack? This isn't fair. And then Jesus comes and says, yeah, that's not fair. You shouldn't have to do that. He says, look, when he invites you to carry a mile, go another mile. Go another mile. Go above and beyond. Why? Why in the world would Jesus want these people to do this? I think it's because it's a moment that was meant for hurt, that was meant for power, that was meant for evil. And Jesus says, look, this is an opportunity to turn it into a moment of hope, of love. I mean, think about if you're a Roman soldier and you're using your power to force it on someone else. And then this person goes above and beyond. What's that do to you? What does that do to your heart? Do you begin to question and challenge who this person is? I think so. So what was happening in the early church? So Jesus comes and he lives this life, and it's kind of counterculture. It's really countercultural, and people are beginning to notice. Some people are drawn to it. It offends a lot of people. Jesus goes to a cross and he dies. Jesus is brought back to life. Jesus then goes to his followers and says, go tell other people about my life. And then Jesus leaves. Jesus leaves and he looks around and says, all right, it's on you. My spirit is going to be in you, and now you have an opportunity to go and do good. You have this opportunity to lead this unbelievable movement. Now, this is what's crazy. This movement that started, that is still going today, wasn't about power. They had none. It wasn't about politics. They had nothing to prove or no place in politics. It wasn't about money or wealth, because really they had none. And it wasn't even about theology or what they believed. Listen, it was crazy. So even the religious people were like, no, I don't know if I believe your theology. So then how does this movement make it to us today? Well, it made its way to us because of compassion and generosity. It's made its way thousands of years because of compassion and generosity. This is what defined the movement of the early church. The way that was happening in this day and age when these disciples were going around, if someone could do something good for you, do something good for them first, because they then could repay you. You would only do good for someone who could do something good for you back. And so you always wanted to know, well, who is that? Oh, they have money. Well, I'm going to be really good to them. That happens for us too. People who have connections, people who are well off, sometimes we want to partner up with them or we want to be friends with them because we might benefit from it. That was how it was then. And so then this is what happens. What do you think the people who didn't have anything, how were they looked at? No one was going to do good for them. That's why when Jesus comes and he does things, he does it for the least of these. He does it for the people who are overlooked because no one else was, because they could never repay. And so his brother James at one point says, you know what religions that's faultless, that's pure, you know what that is? To look after the widows and the orphans. The widows would have no rights, they'd have nothing to their name, because when they lost their husband, they basically lost everything. So a widow, no one's going to help the widow. Oh, the orphan, they can't do anything for me. I'm not going to help them. And so Jesus comes and he says, look, if you want to do something that matters, if you want to be a part of this movement, then you do something for the least of these. You want to know what your religion should look like? Look after the widows and the orphans. It is extremely countercultural. So this movement that Jesus brings and that has made it to us today was about generosity. It's about compassion. It's about kindness. Because I really believe if we want more and more people to know about the hope that only Jesus can provide, it's not going to be by our words alone. It's not going to be about us telling people where they're wrong all the time. I'll tell you what people will be drawn to is when you love them, when you're kind to them, when you're giving to them, when you're generous, when they see a group of people who actually live out the message of Jesus and not just talk about the message of Jesus. Right? And so if you go back, Paul tells Timothy, look, if you want to help these people be rich, tell them to be rich givers. Tell them to share and be generous with what they have. But also tell them to do good and to be rich in good deeds, and not only to those who can repay other people. Jesus says it like this, also still in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 6, 43 through 48. It says this: you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Not even the tax collectors do that. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? So if you've been around, we've talked about the tax collectors being people who were just hated. They were stealing from their own people to give to an empire that was abusing people. They were hated. And he said, look, even the tax collectors, they love the people who love them. That they're doing that. Verse 47, and if you greet only your brothers, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Look, everyone can be nice to those who are nice to them. Everyone can give back to someone who is given to them. But what would it look like if you live a life that wasn't about only getting from people who could give something to you? And it wasn't just about being generous to those who deserve it. But we were rich in good deeds, and we were countercultural in our generosity. We do things that just don't make sense to people. 2 years ago, we took a trip to Chicago. I was still the youth pastor, and every summer we take students on a mission trip, and we went to Chicago, and we were working in the south side of Chicago. It was a very rough area. Each morning, my guy who was directing our trip, Franklin, would come to me, and he'd give me an update about the crime that had happened in the community that night. The shootings, the gang violence, and he would give me an update every morning. Here's what's happened, and here's where it's at. And so I understood that we were in a pretty dangerous area, but parents, if your kids were on that trip, they were safe. So we were serving in somewhat of a rough area, and we stayed in an old school building where eventually a group was going to come in and provide an after-school program. And so we slept there, and then every day a group of students would clean that building. And then some of us would walk over into the neighborhood, and there were some houses we were painting and cleaning up, and then some of us would walk, a half a mile to a park, and we would work in their community center. And the word was stirring that there were a group of students who were outside of that community who were coming and loving the community. And so every morning I would walk to these areas and make sure our groups had what they needed. And so one afternoon, it was Tuesday, it was early in the week, I'm walking down the road with one of our guys who was there named Justin. He was there helping me. And we were walking with Franklin, the leader of our trip, and we're walking down the road, and we cut down a small alley to head to the back of the church building. At about this time, this old car drives by, and he rolls down his window, and he starts yelling at us. And I hear him yelling at me, and so I holler up at Franklin. I'm like, Franklin, do you know this guy? I said, he's using some words that I don't know if they're very good. So Franklin turns around, Justin turns around, and we all turn around, and we look at this guy. He begins to yell at us. Then he begins to turn his car towards us. And we're walking down an alley, and all of a sudden, this guy floors the car at us. So Justin, Franklin, and myself take off running. I helped them by pushing them to the side, giving them more room, and we run down the alley, and we literally find a dumpster and jump behind the dumpster. The guy pulls up in his car, and he jumps out, and Justin and I are ducking behind the dumpster. We literally don't know who this guy is. We don't know if he has a gun. We just know he's not happy with us for some reason. So he's yelling at us, and Franklin comes out from the dumpster, and he's like, hey, they're here to do good. They're here to do good. He was yelling at us to leave, that he didn't want us there. And so Justin and I, one of the most scared moments of my life, I grab Justin and we run around these houses to leave, and he gets back in the car and he puts it in reverse to cut us off around the houses. So Franklin hollers at us and we run back into the church building. And we go into the church building, we go into the security area. And because of where the church was, and it was a large church, what they were doing, they had cameras all over the community. So they pull up the guy's license plate, and Justin and I have to go to the police station, and we file a report because the church wanted us to. And so this was on Tuesday, and I made the horrible mistake of calling my wife and letting her know what had happened. And she was not happy about us being there, and she was fearful. And this is what I remember. I remember people coming out of their houses. It was the kind of community where the old ladies would sit on their porch, and they would see us walk every morning, those 2 mornings, and they knew what we were there for, and they knew what we were there doing, that we were there to do good. And they were so upset that this happened to us. It bothered them, I think, even more than it bothered us. Some staff members from the church came and met with me and said, we're going to do everything we can to protect you. We're going to have a cop from our community who's going to be around and make sure your group's protected. And are you sure you want to stick around and still do this? Do you want to just stay in the school and not leave? And I said, no, we're here to do this. And it stuck out to them how countercultural it was. That our students who didn't have to be there would be there serving. That our students who didn't necessarily know this had happened, and some of this may even be a surprise that happened during that trip. I didn't tell them, you're right. It's countercultural. We want to leave a movement that is countercultural. We want people to step back and say, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing that again? We're doing it, and it goes back to the first point, because we want people to know the hope that we have in Jesus. The last thing, your good deeds glorify God in and through the church. Your good deeds glorify God in and through the church. Hebrews 10, 24 through 25. The writer says this in verse 23. It says, let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess. Do not let go of it. When things get difficult, don't let go of it. For he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Verse 25, let us not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another. I believe this place is a place where we can spur one another on, that we can encourage one another in our lives to do what God is calling us to do. That when things get difficult and you're wanting to let go of hope, that someone comes up beside you and says, no, don't give up. Don't give up. Keep going. Let's keep doing good because it matters. Don't give up. I think the church can do three things. I think the church, us, not this building, us, can do three things. We can hinder the community. We can be so inter-focused that we forget anything that's going on and we actually hinder the community. We can exist in the community. So our buildings here in North County, we just kind of exist in the community. Or we can exist for the community. We can either hinder it, exist in it, or exist for it. I hope and I believe that we are existing for our community. So let's begin to ask ourselves some questions. What if we really cared for this neighborhood? I think we do. What if all of us coming together, we encouraged and spurred one another on to continue caring for our neighborhood? What if we continued to care about racial reconciliation? That we spoke out against any hate, especially during this time right now. If you're on social media, there are times I read things and I'm just filled with anger. There's so much racism in our community. What if we were about reconciliation and we spoke out against those things? What if we really cared about others and we did for people what they couldn't do for themselves? But what if we cared about our kids in the community? I just real quickly, hang with me here. One of the projects we're working on at Coldwater, this has been just kind of underneath the surface, and I've been talking to people and talking to different people in the community. But here in January, it is our intent to start a 2-day-a-week after-school program at Coldwater. This is what was great, is we thought, man, we should probably do it here and how it happened. And the school was like, no, we want you here. We want your church, we want your people in our building. Great, we're gonna come there. And so I've met with the school principal, and we're gonna work with kindergartners through second graders who are below where they should be in reading and all of their scores. There's about 50 kids, K through 2, who need some help and some attention. And so we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it, and I thought, man, what if this wasn't just about Trinity? And so I've contacted UMSL and Harris Stowe and Lindenwood, and I've got great responses from them, and they want their students in their college to participate and to be a part of it. And then the principal and I were talking, like, what if? What if? And we started doing this. It was this idea of spurring one another on to good deeds. And we said, what if? What if we went to Boeing? And we said, Boeing, this is your community too. These are your kids. They have a leadership center right here. And we said, these are your kids, and we care about their future. We know what's going on right now, but how do we change the culture in our community now and for the future? And so we're going to go praying for this. We're going to be going to them and asking for them to help provide tablets for the reading program. So be praying for that, and we're dreaming big dreams, seriously. I'm believing big things, and this is what happens. I get in a group of people, and we spur one another on. Right? We can do this. This is what a community of people can do and be about, and this is happening through you all over our community. All over. There are people doing all kinds of things. I could stand here for a long time and talk about things that you guys are doing, not just in these walls, but outside in our community. Keep going. Keep going. Keep doing it. I want you to watch a quick video. Tina Wilson. You know what? Hey, I'll show it next week. We'll fix it. You gotta come. Yeah. All right, we're gonna turn around. Okay. Hopefully this works. You guys are beautiful people. You know what? Beautiful people. All right, watch this this video.
Hi, my name is Christina Wilson, and I'm a follower of Christ, a daughter, a sister, a friend, youth leader, runner, and a licensed optician, among many other things. My occupation is a frame sales consultant. In other words, I'm a traveling salesman providing eyeglass frames to private eye doctors across Missouri and Illinois. I've had the privilege of serving on many mission trips, sharing the gospel in various ways with our youth group. I've also been blessed to serve on a local eye care missions to children in need in St. Louis. However, I've never been on one where the gospel and eye care were combined, and overseas at that. I've been praying for about 10 years to have the opportunity to serve on a mission trip in the optical field, which I have a passion for. Main Street Church is a church directly across from my apartment, and they have a missionary family based in Chilca, Peru, running an orphanage. They have also been trying to figure out how to serve the elderly in their communities, and eye care is one of the greatest needs there. Main Street Church asked my landlord, who happens to be an eye doctor, if she would be willing to serve in Peru. She immediately asked my sister and I, along with a colleague of hers, to join her on this mission. Of course, I was thrilled and could see my prayers unfolding into a blessing and a reality. Our purpose was so much more than just providing free eye exams and glasses to the seniors in Chilca and around the area. The medical services there are in serious need of organization, supplies, staffing, and so much more. We collected tons of medical information from all of our patients and organized it in a way that would help the area know what services are needed for their people. We were also able to share the gospel and pray with so many of our patients. The impact we made just by helping them see was life-changing for everyone. We examined about 300 seniors. Many of those people had not been able to read for the last 20 years or more. They were incredibly thankful for their sight being restored and to have us pray for them and their families. The love and gratitude there was overwhelming most of the time. This mission trip affirmed many things for me in my faith and my relationship with Christ. I know that I am right where I belong, in His timing, doing what He has called me to do. Also, that it may take a while, but God absolutely follows through on prayers of your heart when you seek Him.
But we want to be more than just that. We want to be rich in good deeds. We want to be rich in good deeds. Would you pray with me? God, thanks for this opportunity today to be with my friends, those of us who are trying to follow you, and I know a lot of people who are here just trying to figure out what this is all about. God, I'm so thankful for your grace, that it's not something that I've earned or worked really hard for, that I don't have to do a bunch of good deeds, and then at some point you love me enough to save me. But God, you have saved me, and you've saved me to do good things. You've saved us to do good things. I'm so thankful for this group of people who care a ton about our community. Would we continue? Would each one of us figure out what it looks like for us to do good deeds, to be rich in good deeds? It is only through you that we're able to do those things. Help us to fight against the temptation for it to be about us, even to be about Trinity. We want it to be about you. God, I'm anticipating great things. I pray for Coldwater. I pray for that partnership. I pray that we'll look back on what you've done and be amazed at how you've worked things out. God, we continue to pray for our community. We pray for peace today. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Love you guys. See you next week.